Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott skill
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature. I am back up here hosting because I have foisted another comic book upon these fine folks over here.
You didn't force shit, man. It's awesome.
Today we are discussing one of my favorites of all time, Mouse. And so initially we weren't sure that we were going to have time to get through the first two books. So we said that we were going to read the first one. However, we are going to get into a little discussion about the second one because Ian did a little extra credit, and we're going to talk about the complete Mouse.
It'll be like
Stop at the first one.
I agree. I agree. It's very difficult.
It'll be like when you did Predator and then The Predator.
Absolutely.
At once.
Except for much better.
Yeah. Except 10,000 times awesomer.
So I am your host tonight, Steve Ramosi, joined by Scott Thurlow.
How y'all doing?
Jonathan Ian Mazur.
You know, the more I find out about this Hitler character, the more I don't care.
The more I don't like him.
I don't care for him. And Chris Morgan.
L'chaim.
So, thanks for joining us tonight. We have a log line. I'm not sure if it's funny or not, but Ian says he's got one, so let's hear it.
Well, to bring some levity before we get deep down in discussion, there are no cats in America.
And the streets are paved with gold.
Very good. And watch out for another episode coming out.
And that's a
sometime
teaser
soon.
for what we're going to do soon.
Anyway, Ian, why don't you continue on with the plot?
So, an artist is actually fairly... it's a biography of the father of this artist, Art Spiegelman, who is interested in his father's stories about his experience being Jewish during World War II, specifically the Nazi invasion of Europe and experiences in the concentration camps. And it's so much more than that. This is a very personal work discussing a relationship between father and son, son understanding the motivations of how his father acted throughout his life, the history, the Jewish experience during the terrible Nazi conquering of Poland and the oppression of the Jews there, and it's just it's a masterwork.
It's a fucking masterpiece.
And nothing I can say throughout this entire thing can accurately explain the importance of this work. I think it is perhaps the most important comic book of all time, and it is fantastic. And I think just discussing one part of it is like the whole story. You can't just stop at that one part.
I'll say this: we're going to do it injustice, regardless of whatever we do, because there's so much to this book. And
just fucking read it.
I've said this about things before, but for real this time, if you haven't read this and you're listening to us right now, stop, go read the book, and then come back and listen to us blather.
What the book says is way more important than what we're about to say. So we'll do like a shadow of it and give our analysis. But
I just say
I agree with you guys.
This is one of the most impressive works I've ever read, but by how human it is and how it describes the life of a man, warts and all. It is, I don't know. It's brilliant. And
it's wonderfully heartbreaking.
And I think that it's something that can be captured in many mediums, but somehow the comic medium
one's the
works
perfect one.
really well for it because it can capture not absurdity, perhaps the wrong way, but a kind of a surreality of a situation in a way that no other medium can, but still retain that core value of what it's trying to say. I don't know. It's because it's detailing like from their parents' meeting to the tragedies, and then also concurrently with the modern life. And as I mentioned earlier, the son dealing with his father, and overall, it's woven together perfectly. I don't know if it anything could be better. Like it could have been at any point. Like it's very hard to discuss this by how powerful it is. So I'm giving it the strongest of all things. I'm giving it a 10 overall because it certainly deserves everything we're going to say about it.
I mean, yes, I agree. 3, of course, and we can certainly expand upon it, but you're right. Like, whatever we say is a shadow of what the actual work is and still stands for and holds up to. But I will add on, like, as a personal thing, Steve-O might also jump in, is that at the tail end of college, they offered a graphic novel course, which they did not do that before. Like, maybe they do now. Maybe you can take all the graphic novel courses you want now, but back when I was in college, you couldn't. So this was one of the ones that, like, as you said, changed my perception of what the medium could be and do. And given the nature of the story, it was literally, like, it was fucking mind blowing. And you're right, like, it is consistently, ever since it's been published, has made the top 10. Like, and I would argue this, like, not just certainly graphic novels, but not just that, just fucking works in literature as a whole, for sure, is relevant and incredibly impactful. So all that to say, yes, it's a meaningful work. And 3 for plot. I don't know what else that I can add that would be helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's going to be the strongest of 3s for me. I mean, I suggested this book because...
Yeah, so you and I read it previously.
I a couple months ago when I started talking, like, hey, I want to work some comics into the... into our lit show because, we hadn't done any up to that point. I'm glad that this wasn't the first one we did, and Persepolis was I thought a really good one to do first, but like this one,
there is no Persepolis without Mouse,
right? I mean, there's a lot of things without Mouse, but like this is one of the founding pillars of what a comic book can be, and this was something along with some other stuff that came out in the 80s. Along with like Dark Knight Returns and some like more mainstream stuff. This was one of the things that showed how, like, I would say that Mouse is what said independent comics can be something that are just as important as any type of literature. Spiegelman had been working in comics for a long time before this, but this was the one that put him on the map and put comics in general
itself
on the map in terms of like serious literature, along with some other stuff that came out around the same time. But in terms of the plot of this book, it's a super strong 3. Everything you mentioned, there's so much going on. It goes from him not only his father's story in Poland and going to the camp, like eventually going to the camps and things, dealing with the Nazi occupation, but also Art's story dealing with all the fallout of his parents being in the camps, his mother having killed herself because of that, and now his father being remarried to someone else who had experienced the same thing. It's all so perfectly intertwined. Like, all these stories are so perfectly intertwined with each other, and I think it does an amazing job of displaying that.
I just want to jump in quickly to build off what you said. It plants its flag early in that it's a human tale, and that is what works so well for this, because yes, it's an exploration of Art and his father and their relationship and all that, but it's attempting to, in a way I've never seen before. And I love what's the Spielberg film? I'm escaping my mind. That deals
Schindler's List.
Schindler's List. Yeah, like all these kind of works that deal with this tragedy. For the depth they can go into with him interacting with other Jews of different classes throughout this, through the Germans, through the Polish people that he meets, all this, that it describes this time period so well, and in a way that no other medium can
encapsulate.
And perhaps a novel can, but the visual representations along with the written work and the pacing that can be done in a comic format, I think, is what narratively really works for this, and because it interweaves the present day with and him trying to get this story from his father and trying to find out more and more.
I mean, that's a
information.
story unto itself,
Yes.
and it's so
But the
brilliant.
fact that it's kind of bookended by
Yeah.
his conversations with his father throughout this gives it such a personal feel. And there's one early scene where the father's like, "Don't include this in your book. It's embarrassing." He's like, "No, I need to because this makes you human." And that aspect of him being human is what makes this such an affecting thing.
If I remember, he even says to his father that he won't include it,
Yes.
and then he does anyway. Like this
Yeah,
is like
it's like even
Spiegelman
deeper.
really like stripping the layers away.
Mhm.
Like he goes against his father. He shows his father like all of his flaws, and it's that I don't know. It's this really
It's so
fascinating.
raw.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Anyway, Chris, we haven't given you a chance to talk yet.
First thing, when was this first released?
It was 80s, 87,
88
I
or
think
9,
wanna
I want to say, yeah.
I'll
Something
look-
like that.
I'll look it up. Go
Which is interesting because in the 80s, comic books, graphic novels were in decline. So this would definitely have been one of the ones that put things back into the light.
Made it, like, again, a quote-unquote legitimate and respected medium. Sure.
Exactly.
So-
But go on.
Interesting. Looks like Mouse Volume 1 was released initially in 73, and then Volume 2 was initially released in 86.
Okay, then that makes sense. Because again, the 80s comic books were in decline, so to have something that would build upon a prior work would make sense. As I said, precast this book, and I'm ashamed to say that I never read it before this week. And it was much more than I thought it was going to be. I thought I knew what it was going to be, but the story between him and his father and his the woman he remarried, Mala, was just as important as the rest of it. And there's a lot of things we're going to discuss, but one thing aside from the obvious, being the story of the Holocaust and the Holocaust survivors. And I'm gonna digress for 1 second before I bring this point up. But when I was in high school, I grew up in Central Jersey, went to Montgomery High School. We went to Raritan Valley Community College when I was 16. That'd be 1986. And we met some Holocaust survivors. And one of the things that this group of people were saying was, in 1986, because there's still some survivors still alive, he's like, they all reinforce this, like, there's not going to be many of us left in your lifetime. And, to actually meet some people. And a cousin of ours just got bat mitzvahed, and one of their mentors was a Holocaust survivor. So, I mean, it's poignant now that knowing that with each passing year, there's going to be less and less people that were there. So what's important about this work is not so much, in equal measure, what had happened, but the repercussions of the people that came from it. And one of the things I'm really, as a mental health advocate, one of the things I love that he addresses is his mother, Anya, her postpartum depression at the beginning, and then she went to a sanitarium, what they used to call it back then, and the depression that she was never able to escape, which left to her suicide, that he wrote about in a graphic novel within a graphic novel, The Planet Hell, something like that.
Trapped on Planet Hell.
Trapped on Planet Hell.
That.
Yeah.
I'm really
Hell
going
Planet.
to say that he packed so much into this book, but to be able to deal with the mental health aspects of it in such a way. I mean, you're talking about the rise of the Third Reich, and he's talking about postpartum depression and, and the lingering effects of depression, that, you talk about, PTSD and all that stuff.
Stuff that was swept under the rug that wasn't
but
addressed
there's
in
all
any
these
medium.
little components that, are just as important. Not one thing should be overshadowed by anything else, but as an advocate of mental health, I thought it was just incredible that in 1973 and that he included this. It's such, and I don't mean to be patronizing when I say it's such an impressive work. But it is so impressive that the
it was and
things
still is,
that
too. Yeah,
he dealt with back then are just as important, if not more important now. So this gets a really, really strong 3. I just really wanted to bring that part of it in. So that's it.
Yeah, and I mean,
Good call.
we are going to. I know for sure that I'm going to go back and read the second part. I only read the first.
Yeah, same thing.
Mouse is
Bit of a
broken up into
twisty-
2 books. The first of which is called My Father Bleeds History. The second of which is And Here My Troubles Begin. So we read My Father Bleeds History. Me, Scott, I,
Technically,
and
that's what we're
Chris
covering.
read
but-
that one, and Ian read both of these. But I'm going to go and read the second one
and you all should
for
too.
sure, and everyone should read this entire thing. It's super impressive.
Because this is such
I
an
feel like we're on
important work I want
recommend
to talk about, is that the father comes off as very off-putting initially. He's very coarse. He's very
Sort of overbearing
demanding,
a
a bit of a hoarder.
Mhm.
But all of his personality is understandable through his
bit.
experience.
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
And the fact that you get to grow with the author in understanding why his father's the way he is and why Mala is the way she is, even though you don't hear her story,
Mhm.
but knowing that she had, going to your PTSD aspect of it, like the fact that he still has his old habits of how he survived through the occupation and the camps and all that. I don't know, like the entire work is, I'm going to gush over it the entire time.
Anyway, that I think we all agree.
Super strong threes to the plot.
And let's move on to themes. Chris, get started.
An intense question, sir.
Does this book have any themes, or does it have all of the themes?
I think it's the last.
It has all the themes. I can't even have a joke about any joke that with this theme, this book could be, any themes this book could be missing, because it does cover the gamut. I mean, it is much more than a warts and all. I mean, you do understand why his father is a hoarder, why the smallest things have value to him, and it may not be a sentimental value, but a practical value to him. And when he said to his son at some point about friendship, like, you know who your friends are, there's a difference between, where, you know, it's not people who say that they're your friends, but people who prove that you're their friends, or their actions, you know. In other words, you get, everything's got a payoff.
The very beginning you're talking about, like the first, even before the story starts, it's like
Yeah.
the prologue,
Yeah.
where he's helping him saw. He has the roller
Right,
skating
with the roller
story.
skating. Yeah. I mean, there's not a wasted frame. There's not a wasted picture. And I want to, it's going to go into style, but one of the things that I love about this book is you've got the Nazis as cats and you've got the Jews as mice. And then I guess the everyday person, the Poles
The Poles were pigs.
The Poles
French
Americans
were
are dogs.
frogs.
French are frogs.
Okay, the French are frogs.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
But-
gets a little stereotypical at
No,
points.
but the thing that I found interesting was the masks.
Mm.
Where when he went out and
he puts on the pig mask.
when he put on
when
the
he
pig
tried to,
masks, it's just, I mean, that image, just him putting on a mask, says so much about, you know, about who your friends are, who your family is, about who you are as a person. So, I mean, if you want to talk just about identity, you want to take any other theme away and just talk about identity, this book tackles that.
Yeah, man.
I'm going to read a quote quickly to back up what you're just saying. It's from a newspaper article from Germany in the mid-1930s. Mickey Mouse is the most miserable ideal ever revealed. Healthy emotions tell every independent young man, every honorable youth, that the dirty and filthy covered vermin, the greatest bacteria carried in the animal kingdom, cannot be the ideal type of animal. Away with the Jewish brutalization of the people, down with Mickey Mouse, wear the swastika cross. And that goes to the idea of like why he chose a mouse to be just not just the predator-prey relationship there, but also the fact that they're a weird thing, not reclaiming Mickey Mouse, because that's the wrong way of saying it, but reclaiming this prejudice against and using it to empower the people.
So yeah, man, Chris, you said a lot. Yes, the themes of Mouse run deep and intense for sure. Certainly given the subject matter, but also like the personal story between Art and his father as well. Like you said, they're so well intertwined. They're one and the same story. Like they can't exist without each other, and they in fact inform and grow upon each other so incredibly well. And given the use of the medium, again, you're right. I'm just going to gush over this because rightly so. Like I don't know what else to tell you that other than the fact that Mouse is motherfucking amazing, and everyone should read it and can get something out of it. So thematically, yes, of course. I'm going to give it the strongest of ones. I'm giving almost every category a strong one, but themes might be like even like a super strong one in quotes. Like, I don't know how to say it other than that because of the way he is able to embrace it and tell you like make it personal to you as a reader as well, even if it's not as personal obviously as it was to him and to the people involved in it. Sure. Nevertheless, it just is so impactful and is very affecting and you fucking get goosebumps like just thinking about it. So that's my evidence for one.
See, I'm sorry, but I just want to mention this, that what's really powerful about this is the fact that it's so raw about his relationship with the father and the family, and because it's the repercussions of the Holocaust is felt not as an abstract, not as a historical event, but an immediate
not that
conflict.
Something happened somewhere, like in some gray area. Yeah.
And the fact that everyone can see this kind of, or can draw a parallel to Art's relationship with their parents is, I think, what and that his slow realization over how this event affected his parents makes the average reader be able to feel even more so than just watching or reading a novel about it. Has a more immediate impact over them.
Yeah.
One of the things that my wife's family is Jewish, so there's a lot of there's a lot of traditions. There's a lot of I'm going to say it, but I don't mean it to sound. But there's a lot of stereotypes when you talk about different groups of people. I mean, one of them is, with regard to food, and one of the stereotypes is that old Jewish women carry around, hard candies and, take. But the thing is, when there was an excellent episode of Blackish that dealt with like food and tradition, and there was one part where they're hiding in, I think it was when they were hiding in the basement into the garbage dump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where they were in there for 3 days and he kept, and his father kept, giving, they were hungry for 3 days and he gave his wife hard candy, because it helps salivate, keeps the blood sugar.
Yeah.
But
it's also like preserved, like you can keep that in your pocket forever and it'll still be technically edible. Yeah.
And I highly recommend, if anybody's not seen the show Blackish, to check out the episode on food, because it's such a little thing. And I put the book down and I go to Beth. I'm like, I know that, you gotta, I mean, there's tradition. I don't like to call it stereotype because there's a tradition. Like, there's a reason that certain cultures still practice certain things with regard to food. And I said, is this, because this immediately caught my attention. And she was just like, well, if you look at it, in any culture, but specifically here, the Jews, any culture that's been persecuted at any time during, whether it's Jews or whether it's, black people or whether, somehow in America, everybody forgets where they came from. Because I don't understand why certain people that have been persecuted all their life still fight each other, but that's a different argument. But I asked her if this was one of the reasons, was the fact that, you kept, you hide things and you survive on little things like pieces of bread, a roll, a piece of hard candy. And she goes, well, that may be true, but if you look past the tradition for all these years, in any culture that's been oppressed, you are going to find little things that carry on through tradition that we laugh about now or may become a stereotype now, but at some point in time, there's a reason that this tradition carried on. And I'm sorry to go on to that fact that it just kind of hit a crossroads with me today when we were talking about it. And I'm not going to go into referencing everything we talked about, but that was a little,
Sure, man.
that was
completely
a
valid.
tiny, tiny detail that brought up a discussion this afternoon. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I'm not going to go on for too much longer because, I mean, we're going to talk about this for a while, and I don't want to drag it out for 2 hours. But I do agree with a lot that you guys had to say, and I am in awe every time I've read this book. This is probably my 4th time reading it, and every time I read it, it's difficult to read. Don't get me wrong; it's a very tough subject matter. But every time I find myself appreciating just how good it is with talking about these themes and like deftly handling going back and forth between timelines and dealing with each of the problems for everybody in their own way and not like making any of them feel small or in whatever,
like superfluous for some reason.
Like making you understand how people feel when they're experiencing these things. And I think that's super impressive. The one little thing that I wanted to bring up was that this book makes such a huge thing of Vladek, Artie's father, being a hoarder and just holding on to all this stuff because of how he came up through the, when he was dealing with the occupation and things like that. And there's one part where he does not hoard something, and it's the destruction of his ex, of his wife's diaries, or throwing out, or whatever. I think he says that he can't remember what happened to them or something. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about this." Obviously he knew the entire time. It's this. You're supposed to, at least through Art's eyes, you're supposed to think, oh, he willfully destroyed this because he couldn't deal with the pain of having it there. And Art himself already, thinks of him as a murderer for that. He's like, to him, he's murdered his mother, like the lasting image of his mother. And
well, at least her memory.
Right. And it's such an affecting scene. And I just wanted to bring that up when we're talking about themes, because it's so important to the tone and the theme of this work as a whole, like that specific thing.
This isn't in the first section, which you guys read. It's in the second section, but I want to bring it up because I think it's one of the more important scenes. Is the discussion with the psychiatrist. And first of all, they're discussing the morality of the father's actions during the occupation and in the camps, and how life tends to support life, and that is survival at any cost moral, and are the actions you take to survive justified, and are the people who die unmoral just by the viewpoint of that they didn't survive. I thought it was a fascinating discussion that they had.
It's intense and it runs deep.
And the fact is that the father is a decent person. He does connive his way and use his intelligence and wiles to survive where others didn't. And does that make him a hero or not? And it's to me, a really interesting discussion. But there's a quote I want to say, which is Samuel Beckett once said, "Every word is like an unnecessary stain on silence and nothingness." Secretary says, "Yes." And then Art says, on the other hand, he said it. And the secretary says, "He was right. Maybe you can include it in your book." And
yeah,
I think that
it's
was
fucking brilliant. Yeah,
such a beautiful, and I think that's a great demonstration of the thought that went into this work.
It's a perfect microcosm example. Yeah.
I just also one last thing is that I got a lot of my own traumas from my life experiences were brought back through reading this, and although I cannot understand at all, I have maybe a sliver of a look through the cracks in the door of what they went through, and if I've seen a little bit of hell, I cannot imagine at all what that hell was actually like. So,
yeah, I think there's no question that all of us are.
That's a
one.
Mm-hmm.
And let's keep on going with antagonist with me, and fucking Nazis, I suppose.
Nazi cats. Catsies.
And also to catsies, and also like to some extent your own demons that come out of trauma.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Right? And
Sure.
like that's the second part of the antagonist of
I mean,
this.
it's both, of
book.
course, at once.
And
Go on.
yeah, they're both fucking horrible in this. Like they're both monstrous in this book, and it's so much like as shown in the comic within a comic that Art does. I think it's called Escape from
Prisoner on
Hell
Hell Planet.
Prisoner on Hell
Had
Planet.
Ian
that is-
Turner,
alright.
yeah.
Prisoner on Hell Planet. It's just like for Art, it's this idea of like he doesn't really know who his parents are and can never really know like what they went through, right? Like he didn't
Again, he
have to deal with
like
that shit.
a possible glimmer of an understanding of
His
it.
brother
Yeah.
died in the Holocaust. He never met him. And you've got that, and then you just have straight up the Nazis who are, depicted and by all accounts were very horrible, monstrous, like especially people that went around. There's one. What's great about this book, or what's important about this book, is he doesn't make them seem like they were all the same. He like when Vladek is talking about them, he depicts individuals. Like I remember this one. He would just go around and shoot people if they gave him the wrong answer, or like he shows all the different facets of how they're so awful and how they really broke down the humanity of the Jews that were like under their, how they really broke down the humanity of the Jews that were under their watch, I guess.
The guards who accepted the bribe to let people escape and then shot them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, there's so many stories, and then there's the stories of like, not like good stuff, but like when bribes worked, when bribes didn't work. It's not like he tells only the monstrosity, which makes him even worse, right? Like, which makes the entire thing even worse. It's like,
that's why it's so much more human.
look, this actually feels like a story that makes, like, that doesn't make sense, but like, you're not just saying like this is all the terrible shit that happened, and like not talking about like, oh, so this guy we bribed and it worked,
There
and
was
then we tried to do it again and it didn't really, whatever.
The SS officer's girlfriend convinced when the war was lost to just let the people go instead of just killing them.
Yeah,
And he was convinced by his girlfriend to let them go. Like, it's not just, it's not just a monolith that is
right.
just a blank evil. It's a human story down to even the villains.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, so, a la themes, like, the villainous antagonist force runs deep, and it was also, like, because of the framework, because of the meta, like, the fourth wall breaking, right? It's, like you said, it's his relation with his father, and, like, and why his father is, like, is how he is, and what he went through, and, of course, like, Nazis are always going to be, like, the default villain, but it's so much more than just that it becomes so much more impactful, and again, so raw that you can feel it as a reader, even if you might be so far removed from the actual, like, that situation, that it just still hits you so fucking hard on all fronts.
Well, like life, as he progresses through this, whether in Happy Days or not, his original antagonist is his ex-girlfriend.
Mm.
And then it becomes postpartum depression, then it becomes like business associates.
It
then
runs so
becomes
deep and runs a gamut. As one
the Polish smugglers who betray him to the guards. Like every moment has its villain, just as life does.
Exactly. Well said. And one big time one.
Really well.
Yeah, Chris.
It's really difficult because I just did a 5-minute monologue on one frame, and I didn't even come close to doing it justice. And I hope I didn't make an asshole of myself. But I think what was interesting about this, and you're talking about no one being a monolith, is in a situation like this, where to a certain extent, you do have free reign to be yourself. Because there's one character who just liked to shoot Jews and would shoot one a day for whatever reason, and just because he related to Art's father on some very superficial level, he just let him go because he amused him. Whether I don't remember if it was that he knew he was still wearing his mask, I believe, at the time, and it just shows you there's just such a complexity. As I said, there's not a wasted frame, there's not a wasted image, there's not a wasted word, there's not anything in here that is not worthy of its own podcast. So I'm giving it a 1, but I do appreciate the fact that, like, at times the Jews can be antagonists, the Poles can be antagonists, the Nazis can be. It's whatever. It's a 1.
But the communists were also generally an antagonist to the father.
Well, he didn't like him. Not that they ever did anything wrong to him or bad to him.
But he felt antagonized by them regardless. Sure.
Yeah. All right, so that's going to be ones all around for antagonists.
Yep.
Let's move on to protagonists with Scott.
So this is a good one because, of course, on the surface, right, you want to say, like, it's somehow autobiographical and biographical, like, at the same time, right? So it's art, but it's also, of course, his father, Vedic story, right? It's both of them. Again, this is why it's just such an important work, because it's able to toe that line, to tell both stories at once and have them both be protagonists. And then, like, a layer beyond that, be protagonists in a different story, like, to each other. I don't know what to say. So I guess I'll say that I normally do it 50-50, Art and his father, 1 for sure. But even within that, as you guys are mentioning, there are other characters that, like, may not be protagonists, but they're emblematic, though, of the greater thematic elements that we just said, for sure. So yeah, I mean, giving it a 1, I would say, like, maybe this 55% Art, because it's, again, certainly through his eyes. It's him talking to his father, but then his father becomes, of course, the protagonist when it flashes back, if you will, to his story with the camps and escaping the occupation and so forth. So when those scenes are happening, Art is gone from the picture. Like, he's not there, of course, in it. So it becomes Vedic's story. But it doesn't matter because they both work so incredibly well. And then, again, fourth wall-y, if you will. I don't know how stupid term, but like a level beyond that mesh together to create a meta arc beyond it. So
what I appreciate about Art is his level of introspection into his own flaws, which allow him to explore his father's flaws.
Yes, well said, sir.
And so 1.
I'm giving this 1. I can't help, as somebody who's had a very complicated relationship with his dad. I haven't seen him as of 2020. In March 2020, I haven't seen him in 12 years. I have spoken to him once since then, and I'm always looking for a reason why he did what he did throughout my life. He's an asshole. And to watch Art's character in this try to figure out, peel the layers back of his dad, it was very, like, personal to me. I was kind of vicariously, I wanted to hear his dad's story, but I really wanted to hear the story between the father and the son. And the way it left off at the end of the book, I'm like going to go tomorrow and get the second half because I want to find out their story. And I agree with you, Scott. It's so hard to figure out 50-50, but 55, but to look
it doesn't even matter. Like, it
doesn't matter. But to build on your point, what is like the important relationship between his father and why Art Spiegelman is trying to get answers from his father. It's not just about the Holocaust. It's about on a very personal level. And it's just I'm giving it 1. I could just go on, but it's just like, that's it. I've said enough.
Yeah, I mean, to continue on with what you said, they're both incredibly compelling characters, and yes, it's not just about the Holocaust, but it is about the Holocaust. It's about what the Holocaust did to generations following. Like, people that weren't involved in the Holocaust at all are affected by it, and how something like that changes an entire, group of people, an entire race of people, and makes them behave in certain ways. Like the Great Depression did the same thing to a lot of people in America, right? Like the reasons that our grandparents acted a lot of ways they acted, some of them is because they lived through the Great Depression, and
the reason the boomers act like entitled brats
is because they got spoiled
to
by
say
the...
that. Sure,
right.
But the general idea is the same, for sure.
You get what I'm trying to say without taking further cheap shots, I suppose. But like that's what this book is about. It's not only about what happened in the Holocaust, which is incredibly important, but it is about how that affects everything moving forward, how history affects the future. And I think that's a large reason why the first book is called My Father Bleeds History, is because it bleeds into everything that happens from there on out. And that, the Holocaust, Art Spiegelman never experienced anything from the Holocaust, but it completely informs who he is as a person. And I'm sure to some degree informs, I believe he has a daughter now, and I'm sure it completely informs who she is as a person.
Or not completely.
The way that he is informed by his parents informs how he raises his daughter, and it continues to affect as things go. And I think that's a lot of what he's trying to say here. And I guess that bleeds into the theme. We probably should have talked about this in themes, but
but they all feed back
in terms of that.
Other.
But that's why I love these protagonists, because they are like, not only are they great characters, but they're like themes embodied, basically, and at the same time as being like their own kind of puzzling people, which I love about them too. It's like not everything that they do makes complete sense because it's based on a true story, and people do shit that's like kind of wacky sometimes, right? But like you can see where all of it is informed by the past, where all of the history, or where his father bleeds history into all facets of his life. So yeah, very strong one for me. Does anybody else have anything else to say about protagonist?
I think covered it. Fucking one with a bullet.
So Ian, why don't we talk about supporting characters?
This, as I mentioned earlier, very fleshed out world. Almost every single one of the supporting characters has motivation established for why they do what they do. Whether you're dealing with the local Polish peasantry, hiding Jewish people, whether you're dealing with multiple levels of individuals within the Jewish community and how they dealt. Whether you're dealing with the people who became police to police their own people. Whether you're dealing with fellow prisoners in Auschwitz or what's the D?
Dachau.
Dachau.
And how people reacted to that. This is one of the. It's based on a true story, obviously, but like the way art captures the world his father grew up in and informed him. Is every bit as important as any other aspect of this work. Because, and just right to that, relationship between Mala and the father, who's the woman he remarried, fascinating because you're dealing with two people who dealt with the repercussions of the Holocaust very differently. But still, you don't know Mala's story, but through the father's story, you get that she's who she is because of her experience as well. I think that Art's wife,
Anya.
No, Art's wife.
I'm
Francisca,
sorry.
or something like that.
Forget her name.
The French Jewish woman.
Yeah.
Francois, yeah.
I believe.
Her not having the direct connection to the father, but still having to deal and be kind of a foil to Art in a lot of ways. Worked perfectly. I mean, every relationship in this worked perfectly.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
I just want to say something. Scott said before that he was glad that we did Persepolis as the first graphic novel we went into, because it really was a great primer for.
It seems like we did it backwards, but I think it worked out well.
But it worked out well, and the reason I'm saying that is because as with Persepolis, and I didn't realize it at the time Persepolis. God damn it! Why can't I remember? I didn't realize it until I read this, but with Persepolis and with this, I wanted to know, even if it was a casual mention, the authors of both these books made it so that I cared about all the characters they talk about. I wanted to find out all their stories, so I was really interested into as Art was his, finding out what happened to this person. You wanted to find out all these people's stories, whether you're talking 70s, 80s Iran, or whether you're talking, the 1930s Poland. I wanted to find out. I wanted to know about each and every character that was mentioned, and that is a rare gift to be able to create. God, because these are true stories, to have somebody who can translate that, so it moves the reader to wanting to know even more about this world that they've already built.
I just think what you said is very important, because I think that the fact that Art is a step removed from the story allowed him to craft a narrative, or ask the questions because oftentimes he's like, oh, what happened to this person? Oh, did you see this person again? Versus in Persepolis, where since it's a first person viewpoint, they're telling their own stories, so they don't have that removal from it. But both are incredible works. But I think that this holds together a little bit more cohesively, because Art's asking the questions that we as the reader want
to know.
Really without having that blinder on, for lack of a better word.
No, I feel, of course, I mean, I said it in Persepolis and other things when it comes up, because it's based in true life, then it's helpful then to building out the world of characters, because they were actual people. Now, granted, they were not the focal point. Of course, it's Vladek, his father, who is, but nevertheless, my cousin, this and that, right? Oh, we knew another family, we were sheltering them, and they were hiding in this area, and we were trading stuff with that. It all fills out the world, and it's so super tense. And maybe we'll talk about this in style, right? All I'm saying is all the secondary, tertiary characters still matter and have importance unto themselves, and I think what you just said does in fact sort of help build a layer that is and would be a little bit different if it were like Persepolis, but because Art's tell me more about the Mrs. and Mr. and Mrs. X or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Whoever, or the Polish lady who was sheltering Vladek and Anja when they were escaping, right? She had her own arc too, and she was married to a German officer who, granted, was God. That's a own side story as well, right? And their own characters. So all this to say, yes,
I don't think he was an officer.
No, he worked in Germany.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry, but I'm sorry. It was something like that, though.
He traveled a lot, so he wasn't home.
He was only home a little bit, but either way, all I'm saying is all that to just build on everything you guys just said. That yes, of course, giving the secondary one because of the organic rawness to it, because there's a real people, and even if they were filtered through a viewpoint as such, they still came through. He still gave them, gave them their own stories to tell within the greater story as a whole.
Yeah, completely agree. The secondary characters are amazing and voluminous. There are a ton of them.
Yeah.
And they're all great. They all have a reason for being in the story, because
right, they're not just random one-offs or something like that.
The best thing about it is he actually did go and conduct all these interviews with his father. And if his father remembers somebody from that time, then it's for a reason, and he tells him what the reason is, and then you get this whole it's this very simple mechanism to give an entire arc for a person. It's I remember this person because they, my cousin worked at this place and he had an in for me, so I went to go see him. And boom,
the shoe shop guy.
You get the entire story of the cousin in 2 frames of here's my explanation for why he's here, and now I have a whole the more you layer one after another on top of each other, the more you get a full understanding of what the politics of the town were and how they changed so quickly, and all this stuff that's all centered around all these supporting characters that are all so important. You guys have mentioned a ton of them already. There's
dozens more on
60
top of that,
supporting characters in this book.
Yeah.
But they're all have this very quick introduction, but it's in the manner of your father telling you a story about the good old days or something. Good old days, but the old days or something that it's here's like, I have to mention this guy, and here's why he's important, and like, let's move on, and like, and then you tell the story that involves him for this part, and then you're like, all right, so I have his past, I have why he's important to your story, and then it's either, well, I heard he got out, or like I heard that he went to Auschwitz, he was one of the first in the gas chambers, like, and then you get like the whole fucking arc of a character within like a page sometimes, and it's like, Jesus, man, like this is like the life and death of second cousin, whatever, and they're so awesome and like awesomely fleshed out and like just really well done in such a short amount of time. It's really masterful storytelling on top of in two tiers basically, like his father telling him and him telling us.
Like, so it's like it's very relatable too. Like you talk to friends like, oh yeah, I remember working with Mr. or whoever, like Miss Blank, whatever.
Exactly.
And then she did this and he did that, blah blah blah. So like again, it's all so organically interwoven that it's wonderful. One.
Completely agree. All right, so it's gonna be ones all around for supporting.
Yep.
We're gonna move on to dialogue. Chris.
It's getting one. I was listening to you guys talk, and I'm going to. My grandpa was in the Merchant Marine in World War II, and he used to tell us these stories. And my grandma was like, we should put it on tape before I forget him. And we got him a small tape recorder.
No handheld thing. Yeah.
Back in the 80s, this is a really big piece of technology to have these little.
Sure.
And he never used it, and we never used it. And I got the stories in my head. I can remember when he told them. I couldn't tell you the details of them. I couldn't tell you the dialogue. So a lot of what we remember as people is our memories are perceptions, and so what Art's being told by his dad is is basically he's getting we're getting as a second or third count.
It's an oral history
of dialogue. Sure. Yeah. But I appreciate what's there so much, and I know this doesn't really have as much to do with dialogue, but the more I think about this work and the whole, even the minuscule discussion of the tape recorder, he's like, "Hey, I just got this thing for $75, at Corvettes."
We should have gone down to wherever you could have gotten a better deal.
45.
And if you were my age, you'd remember Corvettes in this other place that they're talking about. But I'm just saying that the importance of the dialogue. I don't really have to talk about any one thing that was in here, but just the fact that Art, bless his heart, was able to record his dad telling these stories and giving his accounts of the dialogue, that somewhere he had this on tape and he gave us it to this in this book. I can't say any more about dialogue than to recount my personal history and wish I had those tapes that I can never have. But the dialogue's getting a 1, and it's just spectacular. It's just spectacular.
My grandfather lost his wedding ring in North Africa, and dropped it on an octopus, according to him. That's
got that on tape?
Yeah, now it's on tape now. So that's my World War II story.
No, I mean, I feel you again.
Wild.
Like, I don't have much more to add. Like, Chris, you said a lot of it. Like, yes, of course, because via the framework and via like the nature of it, it's going to be organic because it's literally what his father said, like a lot of it, right? And it's Art's like, not interpretation, even just like Art's retelling of his father's telling of it. And because of that, it's so impactful, and you can't escape its gravity, I guess is the best way I can describe it. But neither is it overly distracting, I guess, over the top. And we're going to get to in a second in the next question. I'll say more there. But yes, for what is there as such, it's top-notch dialogue, and I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah, I absolutely love the dialogue in this. It's some of the best written comic book dialogue that I've ever read. And I think that it's understandable that you could see this and say, oh, he's... this is a good recording of what his father told him. This is some of the best fucking dialogue that has ever been written. His his way of recording his father's like little ticks
Mannerisms and stuff,
mannerisms
yeah.
and his like rhythm of his speech is so fucking good. It's mind blowing, and like you can absolutely be forgiven for not even realizing it because it's so well done that you just fall into it. And like you see, like my grandparents, my father actually too, are from Hungary, and Vladik and Mala remind me so much of my grandparents when they're talking to each other, the way that they interacted. Like they were just like, I mean, my grandparents absolutely loved each other, but they fought like fucking, crazy people. And like the way that the passive aggressive bullshit that they do, just the rhythm of and the tone that Vladik has towards Mala and then towards Art
himself, yeah, exactly.
And then within the story, it's like within the story of his past itself, like towards like as a young man, the difference between that and how he talks as an old man, and the difference between how he talks to Germans and Poles and Jews. The way that this is crafted, this dialogue is crafted, is so mind-blowing. The more that you think about it and the more you look into it, the better it gets, and it's so fucking good.
What I love is that throughout most of it, he's not speaking English. So he has, as a youthful man, kind of mastery of our language.
Yeah.
And he prides himself on his ability to speak English and survives quite a bit through it.
Because of it.
But he mixes up the adjective placement and things like that from his previous, it was his second or third language.
It just adds that. Exactly.
Yeah, it works.
It's so good. It never feels like a joke how like taking that tone with like putting that tone on people sometimes can, or like adding those little ticks can sometimes feel like a joke. It never feels like that. Like it's so good.
Oh, I had his accent in my head the entire time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You can hear him as if you were in the room with them. Yeah, good, Chris.
I don't know. I'm just, there's so much that this book brings up. I mean, you guys were talking language. I was thinking about how Anya was teaching the son of one of the women that was giving them shelter German, and his grades improved because she was being tutored, and they had to say like, well, no, you can't. They said the kid was bright, so he was definitely like, my mom.
It was my mom who taught me.
It was my mom who taught me, yeah. And it was just, it's just like, it's that meta aspect of dialogue within dialogue, language within language. And I did also kind of have to chuckle when he was talking about talking in Yiddish, and you had the Hebrew up there, and you had it translated under there. And as somebody who's had a fascination with Yiddish, and actually, you know
a couple phrases in terms of Yiddish.
I do know a couple of phrases, and my father-in-law, one of the first times I went to dinner with him, he spilled ice water on his lap, and he goes, my schmeckel's blue. And it's just like, or something, I froze my schmeckel, and it was like, but it's just like, so it's like, I know a few things of Yiddish, nothing really.
Mostly 12-year-old childish things, sure, but
I'm sure you hear your schmuck often, so.
I am schmuck, and you heard me say fakakta all the time, so.
True. But yeah, it's just so, again, organic, natural, shows through, and you feel as if you were there, and it's never fake or forced at all. So.
Yep. Ones. So let's move on to style. That's going to be me. This book, so I'll leave a lot. I mean, there's no chance we can talk about everything in the style of this, but like, what I really want to talk about, and it's the only thing that I'll really mention, is the use of animals to create a sense, to imbue a sense of surreality before the sense of surreality sets, like, the reality of the surreal reality of what is actually happening sets in, right? So like, it's this amazing use of mice and the cats. Of course, that's its own metaphor, right? But like, it's so much more than that. It's the use of this, like, it's taking a step away from reality to show how completely, like, unreal this situation actually was. And I read this book for the first time in a literature class in college. And my teacher was awesome, Hillary. I'm blanking on her last name right now, but she was fucking great.
Shout out to her.
Something that she said when we were talking about this was like, Art Spiegelman is a good artist. You look at this book, and these are very simple line drawings of animals, and the reason that he does that is so that he doesn't distract you from the importance of the message. It's a very simple drawing because this is a very text-heavy comic book. There's a lot of dialogue, and his drawings are basic metaphors, and he's just gonna put down. He wants to imbue you with this sense of unrealism with the animals as people, right? And then he wants to not distract you from the important dialogue that's happening. And he put so much thought into just the way that he designed the book that it makes it this stylistic masterpiece, simplistic stylistic masterpiece, in terms of how the drawing works and all that stuff. I could go on about style on this book for hours, but I'm going to turn it over.
It's its own podcast. Yes, it's absolutely stunningly brilliant because of what you just said, right? On the surface, it seems simple, even rudimentary, you might say even, but it has to be that in order not to distract you from the actual greater happenings at large. And yeah, it sort of introduces you smoothly, okay, so they're anthropomorphized people, right? They're the mice and the cats and the dogs, and what the cool thing always got me and still does when I read it again just now is when he's trying to disguise himself. He's a mouse wearing a pig mask,
yeah,
right? Little shit like that. So yeah, it's just brilliant, an amazing concept, and is executed so well and works brilliantly.
Can I briefly talk about the idea of those masks, because I think it's amazing that in real life he's obviously not wearing a fucking mask. He's just charading as a Polish
but
guy,
it's an amazing metaphor.
Right?
Yeah.
Except for the psychiatrist scene when they're human wearing the mouse mask.
Right, and even that he's subverts his own fucking trope in the middle of his book because he has this long history as an indie
it's been built up.
What's the term? What's the Hunter S. Thompson term?
Gonzo?
Gonzo, yeah, an indie gonzo comic creator. He's all right, so I want to throw that's why he throws his own comic, his own old comic in there and stuff like that. Anyway, sorry.
One with a bullet. Style's amazing.
So I do want to talk about the animals, and we can go into postmodernism and his applications of that and all. I want to talk about animals because oftentimes when confronting the horrors that humans can do, just watching it in a visual medium is engaging but can turn off people in the sense that they refuse to acknowledge the fact of what's happening, and in a sense it becomes just a movie, whereas adding an animal element to it divorces the immediacy of the act and your own guilt in those acts,
natural disinclination towards it or something,
and can draw you farther into what actually realizing what the actions are that's taking place. And also comics are really important for things like this because in a novel form where you have to impart your own imagination into it, or a film which is too visceral at times, a comic allows you to capture both the visual aspects, but also that removal of it from that immediacy.
Well said. Both of those things.
Briefly to cap that off, I think that's why Schindler's List was in black and white, in order to divorce it a little bit from reality, and brilliant move by Spielberg to do that. Just as I think that
similar
making these animals, making these characters animals.
So that's why Watershed Down,
right,
and Animal Farm are both tackling very heavy subjects, but because they're animals, we can or it's not as
It breaks down the
confrontational
exactly.
Right.
Yes.
as it is when saying a human did this.
Yeah. Good.
I'm just going to say that, to your point about the written word versus film comic book, and I said this briefly before about the idea of the masks. Any single frame where any character is wearing a mask of something else says more than you can actually put a word to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude. Very
So-
well. Very well. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You're right.
All right.
100%.
Strong ones, and again, we could talk about style forever, but we're not going to. We're going to move on to recommendation. Scott.
Yes, 1000%. If you haven't read Mouse, as Steve said, stop. If you read it this far, stop listening now and go and read it. Hopefully you read it before. Yeah, it's such an important work, and even beyond the boundaries of its medium. Like, now, yes, it happened to be like brilliantly done and expertly. It's the perfect medium to tell the story. It could be a film, sure, but it wouldn't have been impactful. Could be a short story or novel, sure, but it wouldn't have been as again resonating. So yes, Mouse is just a must-read, no matter who you are, I would say. And yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. It was very excellent to read. Part 1 again, like you said, Steve, it's been like maybe 4 or 5 years or more even since I read it. But it was a good choice to do for this episode, and I'm glad we did. I'm glad you guys were able to experience it for the first time. It's wonderful, and it's just so meaningful, and you need to check it out, and still stands 1 with a bullet.
I think if you're on the fence about the Nazis, this might put you over to the side of
The only people who don't like Mouse are literal Nazis. I don't know what else to say.
But no, I think it's a wonderful work. I think it captures a moment in time which should be remembered for its tragedy, but with making it very
It's both
human.
timely and timeless in a sense, I would say.
Sure.
If that makes sense, you know what I mean?
Humans don't ever become better people. Not a human becomes a better person. Humans don't.
Right. Not, yes.
The I can give you 1,000. I think we can all give you 1,000 reasons to read this book. I recommend reading it and telling us what we missed because to me this obviously brought up a lot of personal issues in addition to the narrative it was telling. I think it is just a great exploration of everything. I don't think that there is a character in here that you cannot relate to or relate to somebody in your life. And one thing that I kept thinking of, is that when my grandpa would tell those stories, I always had that part of me that had the image of Quint telling the story of the Indianapolis and Jaws. And I kept thinking about, because when they'd have the dialogue between he and his dad, and then they'd switch to his dad's story, I'm like, what was Spiegelman thinking when he put the recorder on and his dad would start talking? How did the world in that room appear to him? And then, obviously later on in the story, you go on and he talks about, I don't want to say superficial stuff because that is not the correct word, but he will latch onto something about his mom's diaries and so forth. At what point did that facade, did the curtain draw back and he pinpointed that thing and be like, all right, Dad, you kind of broke the fourth wall and be like, all right, Dad, that point, I'm just very curious. Now I'd love to know from Spiegelman what his experiences were like. So I really would like to know if anybody's listening to this and wants to leave a comment, what did you get out of it that any one of us missed?
I'm sure there's doctoral papers written about this.
Exactly.
Spiegelman's still kicking around, so maybe we'll get him
He's
on the horn.
72.
Yeah, not that old. He wrote well, I'm going to recommend this. And now a brief aside. He wrote a story shortly after 9/11.
Yeah, In the Shadow of the
called
Towers.
In the Shadow of No Towers.
That's right, yeah.
Which is this giant-sized cardboard stock book, and it's really good as well. If any of you guys want to borrow it, I'll loan it to you. I got it at my house. But yeah, man, Spiegelman's a very, very interesting creator. I wish that I had read more by him. And I'm gonna go. I think about this every few years after I read Mouse. I'm like, I gotta go like seek out more of his old stuff, like pre-Mouse and his like indie stuff, because I'm really interested to see like his development as a creator. But anyway, regardless of that, Mouse, amazing book, fucking phenomenal. Go read it if you haven't already. I don't know why you
read it
listen to
again
this
if
whole
it's
thing.
been a while.
But it's one of the few books. I don't reread books very often. It's one of the few books that is worth a reread. I've read this. Like I said, I think it's my 4th time through, and gets, if possible, it gets better every time, and it's just so good.
You can
It's so
appreciate
well
it, and yeah, exactly.
you can appreciate it in a different way every time you read it. That's for sure.
Yes.
I know I digress. Did I flat out tell you I recommended it because I do?
Yes.
Okay,
It was pretty clear.
Yes. So that's gonna be ones all around.
Is it a 10, sir?
It's gonna give us all 10s.
And
Is it a 10?
yes, of course.
Yes.
It's the strongest 10 in the
I'll
world.
go far enough to say it deserves the Pulitzer Prize.
Well, luckily for you and everyone else,
They figured it out. Yeah, they got it covered.
it did win that. So, that's going to give us 10s. Thank you for joining us. I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined tonight by Scott Thurlow,
I want to see you next time.
Ian Manzer,
Good night.
and Chris Morgan.
Peace and long life. Live long and prosper, and be excellent to one another.
And watch out for coronavirus.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.